Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you another movie review. Before I start, I want to forgive if you hear any background noise. My niece and nephew are over and watching TV in the other room with my grandma, that's why. Any other background noise, it's because they're in here. Say hello, Molly. Say hi to the camera. I know he's not going to say anything, he's going to be a little butthead. Anyway, movie I'm reviewing today is the sequel to the last movie I reviewed. It, of course, is Superman 2. And of course, as that's an indication, this review is based off the Richard Donner cut. And of course, because of that, I feel like into the history of Superman 2's production. As I mentioned last time, it was originally supposed to be shot fully back-to-back with Superman 1, but when all of Superman 1 was filmed and most of Superman 2, they decided to concentrate on completing Superman 1, and this film was about 75% complete. And also in the course of discovering this, I also found out another thing that I'll bring up later in the review, but apparently once the first film was released, Donner was going to come back, but he had a request that one of the producers be kept out of the project because I guess he was trying to backseat direct or something. And they said, nope, that's not going to happen. So Donner was booted off, and Richard Lester was brought on to direct it. Now Lester, the only two films that other films he's directed I heard of were his two-parter Musketeer movie, the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers, and its later sequel, The Return of the Musketeers. Other than that, I haven't really heard of his other films. Oh, of course, other than Superman 3, but that's an obvious. But from what I understand, his cut of Superman 2 has a lot more comedy and stuff in it, maybe a little bit of camp, which is not really what Donner was going for. Which is why I hear that some people, even though they like Superman 2, they say it does kind of clash with the first film, which I have to say that's probably... which I haven't seen the scenes, but that is probably a bad thing. I mean, it's not like how the tones are different, like when you go from Batman and Batman Returns to Batman Forever, because it's a totally different director with a totally different film. He's not taking from a film that another director started and then redoing stuff. If you get my point. Now, for years, fans had actually been petitioning Donner to do his own cut since there wasn't enough material with what he shot and then what Lester had to shoot for them to do it. And it wasn't until Superman Returns was actually made that we actually got the chance to, because for one thing, part of the problem was the fact that because of a little bit of a bickering between Marlon Brando and the studio, his footage that he shot for Superman 2 could not be used. And because they did that little deal to incorporate his footage into Superman Returns, they were allowed to use it for this. And of course, I will say his footage in this film does actually really play an intricate part in it, and it does fix one plot hole that Superman 2 apparently has involving Superman and the Green Crystal, which is, it's kind of inferred what it does in the original cut from what I understand, but here it actually shows fully on what it does, which I think is it's a great scene. It's a very powerful emotional scene. And let's say what else to say about it. About the cut thing, that's about it I could probably touch on. That better be Superman. You'll believe a man can call. It never fails. The phone always rings. Sorry about that, guys. Anyway, it's written by
And Leslie Newman, Tom, don't know how to pronounce his last name, and Mario Puzo, who is, I forgot to mention in the first review, but he is known, of course, for writing The Godfather, ironically also with Brando. That's a little, I wonder if that was intentional casting or not. Even though my wife is godmother to your only daughter. You know that movie. Now, the music for the film was done by Ken Thorne, because apparently John Williams was busy, I think with Star Wars around the time they were scoring this film, I guess. That's just what I hear. Maybe it was Empire, I don't know. But they did use the original theme, which I think works. But it makes me wonder how John Williams would have scored the film if he had done it entirely, but that's, you know, wishes were fishes. Now, since this is Donner's one, and it's mostly his footage, but some of Lester's footage comes in, but on the whole, Donner's direction is actually pretty well, and the tone is very consistent with the first film. It does make me wonder if it wasn't for that one bickering, how he would have actually done the film 100%. But for what it is, it's still good. It's interesting to watch, and there is, if you guys can get your hands on this DVD, there is a couple interesting features, like there's deleted scenes, there's an introduction by Richard Donner, which is interesting, there's a commentary, which I haven't listened to yet, but there is an interesting featurette, which I'm going to try to find on YouTube and put it in the description box. It's called Superman 2 Restoring the Vision. It involves Donner and his cuts editor going and talking about the process of it. It's a very interesting little documentary. Wish there was a couple more features, like maybe some talks with some of the surviving actors about it. Because obviously we can't get Christopher Reeve talk about it. Sad, because all sad what happened to him in his accident, and of course him no longer being with us. But some of the other actors and actresses, I'm sure, would be interesting to hear what their thoughts on the whole situation about Donner being fired was. If it's on another DVD, let me know, because it's the one thing I'd actually want to hear. Now, anyway, the plot picks up right after Superman 1 ends. Although in Donner's cut, we do see the part of the whole trial with Zod from his point of view with different angles, which I think is fitting. And it picks up new in the plot right at the end of Superman 1, where one of the missiles is thrown into space, and it hits the Phantom Zone, releasing Zod and his 2 minions, Ursa and Non. Now, they eventually make it to the moon and meet an astronaut and a cosmonaut, and of course they see that they have the powers that Superman has, and they decide to head to Earth. There, Superman, after saving the world in the first film, he's not really going to have any threats until they arrive, but the thing is, this is from the ending of the first film, Lois Lane is beginning to suspect that Clark might be Superman, so she does a few things in this film to try to, out him, like jumping out of a window. Clark saves her using, very subtly his powers. And then, of course, when they go to Niagara Falls, she tries to out him again, and she successfully does it. And this is a scene that I don't know how she finds out that he's Superman in the Lester cut, but in this one, it's a scene that they never got to actually shoot for the final movie. But thankfully they had shot it as a screen test, so they had it, so they inserted it into the movie. And it's a scene where she fakes him out using a gun, and it's a testament to how perfectly cast Christopher Reeve was, because I don't remember if I mentioned it in the first review, but Reeve playing as Clark Kent, as actual Clark Kent, who is Superman, one thing is good, but when he's playing Clark Kent, the caricature version, as I was saying, playing the caricature version is basically playing a character playing a character. And of course, it takes a very talented actor to pull off something like that, and Reeve was a very talented actor, and he pulled it off here. And just one part of the scene alone just shows how well he was into the character and how good he pulled it off. If you guys could see the scene, you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, after she finds out, they begin to have a romance, and Clark begins to mull on the fact that even with his powers, he probably wouldn't be able to have a normal relationship with her, which I call BS on. I mean, granted, he's far more powerful than Spider-Man, but Spider-Man could have normal relationships, even though the villains probably would want to do something to his love interests. Which, you guys, even if you've only seen the movies, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, he gets rid of his powers, which, depending on the cut you watch, he does get them back, which I'm not going to go into that, but it's emotional in his character development. And, of course, he sees the error of his ways once the 3 Phantom Zone criminals show up. They easily take over the planet, and, of course, they eventually meet in the White House. Who else but Lex Luthor, because he broke out of prison. And, of course, he somehow found out who Superman is. I'm not going to explain how he did it. And, of course, he tells Zod that he can give him the son of Jor-El, which you all know that Zod's going to want that. And, of course, eventually this leads to one of the more famous lines everyone remembers in this film. Kneel before Zod, son of Jor-El! Everyone remembers that line. Kneel!
Anyway, eventually, once he gets his powers back, Superman does go to confront them. Of course, everyone knows that line as well. General, I think we better step outside, or it's something like that. And of course, it leads to a fight, which, for the technology they had in the late 70s, early 80s, it actually is well done. You could tell it's wire work, but it's so well done you can't see the wires, but you can kind of tell how they shot it. But it works, and it kind of is the charm of how they did it. Of course, if it was done now, the fight would be a lot more elaborate. A lot more like, kind of like Dragon Ball Z choreography, something like that. A lot more intense, kind of maybe like how they're going to do it in Man of Steel. Flying around, punching and all, kicking and all that stuff like that. But for the time period, it fits, and it doesn't make the fight any less epic. It's just kind of constrained by the technology they had in the 70s. But like I said, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just some people might find it dated. I don't, because I like effects like this, especially some of the earlier stuff we see where they're demonstrating their strength and stuff. Now, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but it is a good one, and and how the movie ends with how they get rid of the three villains, it fits both the characters of Superman and, of course, Lex Luthor. For those of you who haven't seen the film, take that at what you will. Now, the acting, Reeves, I've already mentioned, great as Clark Kent Superman, even though, as I mentioned before, I'm not really a fan of the whole caricature Clark Kent aspect of the character. It is how Reeve pulled it off is a testament to his skill as an actor. Margaret Kidder as Lois Lane, great. I have to say how Wikipedia describes the character: beautiful, sexy, feisty, and intelligent. That fits her portrayal as Lois Lane. And of course, the back and forth between those two really does go more in this film. And oh yeah, before I get too far, another thing I like about Reeve in this film is you actually get to see a little bit more character development on the human side of the character once he loses his powers, and you could see that he really now gets to see for the first time what it means to be human, and you get that combined with Zod and all them is part of the reason he changes back. And he does have a thing at the very end where he teaches a human a lesson. Now, some people think it's kind of out of character for Superman, but I don't really think it's that out of character. I think it's perfectly in character if you look at it in a certain context. Anyway, Gene Hackman, once again, great as Lex Luthor. Still the same character he was in the first film, only this time he's trying to use the three other Kryptonians being there to his advantage, and it works. Ned Beatley as Otis, still good. Or Betty, excuse me. Jackie Cooper, once again, as Perry White, only in a couple scenes, still good. Mark McClurry as Jimmy Olsen, still good, even though he's not in the film as much. Now, Terrence Stamp as General Zod, excellent. You only see him in one scene in the first movie, and you know that this guy means business. But this is where you actually get to see how ruthless, arrogant the character is, and how much of a megalomaniac Zod is. And Stamp was the perfect casting choice. From what I understand, he's a little bit more over the top in the Lester version, but he's a little bit more serious in this one. But you can still get some of that over the topness. But it fits the tone of the film, at least this cut of the film. And you still see all that come through, especially in a scene where even though he has powers, he picks up a gun and starts shooting people with it. You can tell he's having fun there and just enjoying himself. He loves mayhem. And when there's no challenge left, he gets quickly bored, which of course Superman would be his challenge. Even though it'd probably be more sporting for him to try to take off Superman by himself instead of having to have his minions come and help him. But that's just me. And of course, Sarah Douglas and Jack O'Halloran as his minions, they work perfectly. He got the big, tall, stupid one. Then he got the sexy in an evil way minion that's also by his side, and they work well off each other. The three of them, perfect foils for one another. Valerie Perney as Eve Tessmacher, Luthor's assistant and girlfriend, still pretty good. E.G.A. Marshall as the president in a brief scene, pretty good. And Marlon Brando for his reinserted scene is a pretty good job. And of course we do get to see some character development between father and son there that is just great. Now, that's about it all to say about the film. The special effects are great. Now in this film they actually had to touch up the special effects a little bit because of the fact that in most of Donner's footage, especially the stuff that wasn't used, the effects weren't finished. But they did it in a way that it actually does match the late 70s, early 80s one. Like, they didn't really want to use that much computer stuff, which that was Donner who said that. He was emphatic about that, and I'm actually glad he was, because it helps the film more. It doesn't clash. Score, very great. Direction, great. Acting, great. The sets and all that, still very great, and it's a good companion piece to the original film. Now, the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2, I give it a 4.5 out of 5. And if you've only seen the Lester cut of Superman 2, I highly recommend you give this one a watch as well.